Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Jeff Moonen.
And I'm Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to episode 124. And this episode, we wanted to talk about the Kirby franchise. And to better facilitate that, we are joined by friend of the network, fellow podcaster, and massive nerd, Jacob McCourt. Mr. McCourt, thank you for joining us today.
Hi. Thank you. That made me sound like a teacher there. And I'm here to school everyone about Kirby and how great the series is. So let's get into it.
I love introducing people with honorifics and seeing how they react. This is my quiet pleasure in chaos.
I have a lot of teachers in the family, so it fit really good.
Jacob, it's so exciting to have you. For those who don't know, Jacob, of course, is an incredible podcaster in his own right. He is the host of the Left Behind Game Club, as well as Cutscenes, a video game movie podcast, which I do the intro for, and is also a previous host of Side Quests, both doing episode 10 on Kirby Superstar, one of our first 10 episodes, and 109, which was Sonic 3 and Knuckles, arguably two of the best games ever made. So good choices there.
Right.
And from back in that episode, I knew that Jacob was the right person to bring on this panel because you seem to really love the Kirby games in a way that I think nobody casually likes Kirby. For the most part, you either think he's the cutest thing you've ever seen or you have no idea what a Kirby is.
I feel like you can quietly obsess over Kirby, but not casually.
Right, exactly.
Do you want me to talk about Kirby right back at you from Foxbox? Because I will do that if you want me to.
I've got a tab open for that. We will get to that. Trust me. But first, I want to start by talking a little bit about our earliest Kirby memories. I know that we're all around the same age, so I have an idea of one of like three games it probably is. But we'll start with Jacob and then go to Jeff and then me last. But Jacob, what's the first Kirby game you ever played? How'd you discover Kirby?
So I think I'm going to cheat a little bit here because I think I actually got, with my Super Nintendo, two Kirby games at the same time. And those are the two games that really turned me onto the franchise. And that was Kirby Dream Land 3, which, Matt, I think we're going to have words about.
Yeah, a little bit.
And then Kirby Superstar, which is arguably one of my favorite games of all time. My brother and I spent countless weekend afternoons. I would always relegate him to Gooey because I'm a terrible brother. And I'm like, you're the younger brother. You get Gooey. He has a tongue. He's kind of gross.
That's
Enjoy.
what younger brothers do.
That's what younger brothers are for. Take the Gooey for the team. So I would say those are the two that I adored. I think Kirby Dream Land 3 maybe hasn't aged as well as Kirby Superstar, but I think nonetheless those are my two games that turn me on to Kirby.
Nice.
What about you, Jeff?
Kirby's Adventure, to make it easy. My household had an NES long after it was fashionable, and we completely skipped over Super NES. By the time it was in my house, the PS1 was already in full swing. So Kirby's Adventure was that latter day NES release, and so that was the game that my brother and I obsessed over. And the copy that we had, I ended up breaking in a fit of younger brother rage that I do deeply regret. I broke two pieces of NES things. I broke the Kirby's Adventure and the NES Advantage controller. Two separate incidences.
No.
And I remember what I was mad about with the controller. I don't remember what I was mad about with Kirby. So I don't even feel like I can properly apologize for what I did there. But
that's the controller with the joystick and the very large buttons, correct?
That one.
Yeah.
And it never worked right after that. No. It was very much it was never the same. But Kirby's Adventure I obsessed over and played, and when I got a Game Boy Pocket so I could play Pokemon, I dove into Kirby's Dream Land 1 and 2. One of my friends at school was obsessed with Kirby, so that became a super easy thing. My first SNES Kirby game was Kirby's Dream Land 3 because I borrowed it from the kid I got my SNES off of.
Nice.
So them's the hits for me. But yeah, Kirby's Adventure to take the long way to a short question.
Yeah, it's funny for me. I'm gonna get all hipster on everybody. I played Kirby when it first came out. So for those who don't know, Kirby is actually one of the rare Nintendo characters that debuted on the Game Boy. Not a lot of characters got debuts. When we did our retrospective on Metroid, Samus 2 was one of the first rare sequels to only be on the Game Boy. But Kirby is a character who debuted on the Game Boy, created by the incredible Masahiro Sakurai, who we know for so many things now, but it is his brainchild. And so when I was in grade school, Game Boys were becoming really popular. Kids were taking them to school. Of course, teachers were yelling at us. And a friend of mine, who I think listens to the podcast, I believe it was him, my friend Matt Curry, who I went to grade school with. We connected much later on in life via Facebook again, who was a big video game nerd, had a Game Boy and this Kirby game. And I saw him playing it. and I'm pretty sure this is correct. I know he was in my class. I could be meshing memories. If he listens, he will call me out if I'm incorrect. But I'm pretty sure it was him playing this game. And I was like, this is cool. What is this? And he told me about it. And I was like, man, I need a Game Boy. And so I don't remember how I got my first Game Boy, whether I bought it from a friend or actually went out and got a Game Boy. But I knew I got my hands on one. And I believe he lent me Kirby before I bought it for myself. And I just became obsessed with this game. This game that I remember being this epic adventure. Playing Kirby recently, I have it on my 3DS as downloadable. You can get through that game in 45 minutes. And then if you play the harder mode, which you get after beating the game, maybe that takes an hour and a half. It was not a difficult game, but I just remember it being this gigantic epic adventure as a kid. We had less time for games or more time, but like we didn't really finish games as kids. And so maybe that skewed it. And so then when I finally got a Nintendo and I heard there was an in-color Kirby game for the Nintendo, I was like, I have to have this, and loved that and became obsessed with that. Since then, I've played every game in the franchise, maybe not as they came out, but even the side series, I've played most of them for better or worse. But Kirby's Dream Land was my first experience with Kirby and one of my deeply favorite Game Boy games that I still play every so often. Geoff, you probably broke your copy of Kirby's Adventure because it is a hard game that I don't remember being that hard. I remember beating that game constantly as a kid. I also had Game Genie as a kid, so I probably used that. Who knows? But like I replayed it on stream recently. I played through several games in the Kirby franchise. I know Jacob was in chat for a bunch of those. Kirby's Adventure was much harder than I remembered, especially the final world. The final boss fight wasn't too bad once you figured out his shtick, but like they're much more challenging. Kirby's Adventure, Kirby's Dream Land 2, and Kirby's Dream Land 3 are all way more challenging games than I remembered. Superstar Saga is tough because the controls haven't aged well. Super Nintendo controller just hasn't aged well. We talked about this with Super Metroid. But I really think, and you alluded to this earlier, Jacob, I tried to play Dreamland 3 on stream. I think I got to like the third world, and I just gave up. The level design was really tough for me. I'm sure the game is great, but I think for me the problem was the mix of the Super Nintendo's controls just not aging well and that game's level design just not being as good as Superstar Saga or even the older games is what made me go, nope, I'm done. I got to move on to another game.
And were you also struggling with like the auto scrolls? Because if I remember correctly, that game has auto scrolls.
Yeah.
And I would imagine, given that there are spikes, like spike areas or spike traps, I'm assuming that those are the parts where you're like, this game is bad.
Yeah. I mean, what's ironic is Kirby's known for its accessibility now. Most of the Kirby games are pretty easy. They're geared towards kids, which I think is great. I do like that, and we'll talk more about this in a bit. The newest Kirby game does have like a hard mode, which isn't still that hard, but like something that's a little more challenging. And I appreciate that, but like Kirby's always been kind of for kids in the same way Pokemon has been, and I like that it continues to be. And I've just always been obsessed with this character. First of all, for those who don't know, Kirby is canonically an elder god. Think Cthulhu. Like, I am not joking. I'm not making this up. It is fact. The lore of the Kirby series is not something we're going to get into too much, but it is fascinating. And if you want to go down a rabbit hole that will break your brain, read, like, there are rumors that like one of the planets in one of the older Kirby games kind of looks like the Earth, but it's grayed over, so they think it's like a post-apocalyptic frozen Earth that's named something else. It's wild. Like the lore to this franchise is wild.
Is that because Kirby ate it all?
We don't know.
No, it's because all of it left and formed into Kirby. Kirby is the ravenous hunger of a dead Earth.
I love that. But yeah, Kirby is one of those franchises that's just kind of been around for a while. And it's funny too, a lot of folks in the most recent Smash Brothers are like, I don't understand why Kirby is like the hero of that story mode. I'm like, because this game is made by the creator of Kirby. Masahiro Sakurai is known for it's his character. It's funny because when you look up other characters, it's not often that like Shigeru Miyamoto gets credited for creating Mario and Luigi and Zelda and Link and a few other characters. But like for the most part, it's like someone created the franchise or the first game, not just that character. But Masahiro Sakurai is specifically credited as the creator of Kirby. It's his brainchild. And of course, worked for HAL Laboratories for years and years and years.
I think HAL Laboratories' contributions get overlooked a lot in like the history of Nintendo. Like they have worked on a lot of games in the zeitgeist of Nintendo, and I feel like they just get swept under the rug.
Yeah.
They have been like kind of the quiet background workers, and even as much as their accomplishments have been lauded, they did so much back-end work on black box NES games, on early Game Boy titles, they were the cartilage that kept all the big joints moving. And you're right, they still deserve yet more credit.
Yeah, they get most of their praise now for the Smash Brothers series, which of course is great. But like they'd been working on Nintendo titles before that, and they've done tons of other Nintendo titles outside of that. Most recently, they did the mobile game and now the Switch release of Part-Time UFO, which is adorable and a really great game. They've been doing work for a long time in the space, and I've loved Kirby games since those early days. And like for me, I think what it is I love platformers, which is no secret on this show either. Geoff and I are both big fans of platformers, but I think there's something about the accessibility of Kirby and the versatility of the character, because there's another thing that people I don't think talk about enough. There are very few Kirby games that you could jump into and go, I don't know what's happening. They all kind of start from square one. There's some kind of threat and Kirby takes it on. There's not a deep dive on the lore within the games, at least. And I think that's great. Like people can play Forgotten Land. In fact, I know previous SideQuest host Jesse DeHaan jumped into the newest Kirby because I would shut up about it on Twitter, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it. And I just love how Kirby is like, yeah, something's gone wrong. Kirby's brave and going to take it on. That's the story. Enjoy, more or less.
Yeah, I super appreciate how Kirby is a vehicle for different teams at Nintendo's creativity. I mean, if you look at a game like Canvas Curse, that is a game that you play with a stylus because we needed games on the DS that utilize that technology like few other games did. Even for Feelgood, who made Kirby's Epic Yarn, that game, although kind of fits in the box of a traditional Nintendo platformer, just from a stylistic perspective, was something that we had rarely seen in games, maybe outside of Unravel and Unravel 2. Like, where do you play as a Yarn character? Nowhere.
I was waiting for you to say something bad about Epic Yarn, and I was gearing to throw hands.
No way. That game is the worst thing you could say about that game is it's very simple. It's probably the easiest Kirby game that you could play, but beyond that, it's fantastic.
Well, I think we are also dancing around something that I utterly love about the Kirby series. We've mentioned, it's a pretty easy series. It's pretty easy to get into and everything else. But also, yes, Kirby canonically is an elder god. And these things go together. Bear with me for a moment, because the Kirby franchise is beautiful in, yes, if you want to engage with it, if you wish to see the credits, if you want to any of that, you can just skirt along the surface, have a great time, and you have lost nothing. If you want to find everything, if you want to get every medal in Epic Yarn, I remember, it was pretty easy to beat, and I did it as a 2-player game with my spouse, but we didn't complete it. We didn't get everything. That's where the frustrations come up. If you want to perfect every level in Kirby's Dream Land 3, if you want to beat Kirby's Dream Land 3, yeah, you can do it. But do you want to finish it? Then you need to solve puzzles. And Kirby, in general, due to the fact that has a very straightforward way of interacting with the world. Eat. And copy. It's not a thing of like managing your inventory and going, well, let me try this item on this. It doesn't become a point and click adventure. It becomes, well, that thing's being held up by a rope, so I need something that cuts it. Are there any enemies in this area that does that? No. So I need to go and eat a Sir Kibble and get the cutter ability from this other level and survive getting here. It all is fairly straightforward, yet can be extremely challenging, and it allows you to engage at your own pace. You beat Kirby's Dream Land 1 on the Game Boy, and it gives you the password to unlock hard mode. You can then turn on your Game Boy. It doesn't save that. It doesn't check if you've beaten it. You can just do that from the get-go because the original design for it was meant to be a bite-sized adventure because it's for the Game Boy. And I think that level of quick accessibility or quickly getting to whatever level you want it to be at without navigating too many menus, without anything like that, was baked in from the beginning and has continued onward and is one of my favorite things about the Kirby franchise. And unfortunately, Matt, no, Kirby's Adventure is not a hard game for me, but I've been playing it for years and years and it's in my bones. But
fair enough.
Remembering how to 100% it, I remember a couple of times, a couple of those, I don't know what they're called, like little star switches that you hit to unlock everything. Like, yeah, those are tricky. The mini games that are in there are ridiculous. And because the things are so codified, it becomes so versatile as well.
I mean, I should mention I also played them on the Switch Online setup. And so it is renowned that they are the worst emulators in existence and that the input delay is awful. And
that's fair. Yeah. I was playing it on the NES before.
Right. And so likely my struggle was more, and this could be for Dreamland 3 as well, is that I'm playing on the Switch Online. And while I love the fact that we have all these games, the input delay is awful and egregious. And that might be why I struggled with Super Metroid as well more recently, because I did play it on that as well.
That's valid.
But that's the way I can access them right now if I don't want to emulate illegally, as it were. And so that's a bit frustrating. But I agree, Geoff. I think also, like Jacob, you touched on some of the side series. What's interesting about Kirby is its mechanics. It's basic, right? In the first game, you could just eat. In the second game, you could eat and copy. And so on, it's grown. What I love about the franchise is it's never afraid to take risks. Jacob recently shared a photo with us. He's playing Kirby Mass Attack, which was like you have multiple Kirbys. You can summon them in. They can wreak havoc. Kirby Planet Robobot.
It's Loco Roco, but Kirby.
Which I played for the first time very recently in a very similar way that when the new Metroid came out, I played Samus Returns on the 3DS right before it came out. I did that with Planet Robobot. You get a mech in this game.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But you still have copy abilities. But like there's a stage where you eat the jet ability and then you become a jet. And it's a side-scrolling shoot 'em up. When you eat the wheel ability, the mech transforms into a motorcycle and then you just drive through a stage. Like that kind of evolution and free thinking in Kirby is, I think, what has made these games so successful, and even made the spinoff successful. One of the most underrated games in Kirby's entire history is a little GameCube game called Kirby Air Ride, which
let's go!
Most people have not played. And for those who are not familiar, it's a Kirby racing game where you can play as Kirby and I think other little characters. But for the most part, you get these different warp stars that have different abilities. And there are two modes. There's a racing mode, and then there's a mode called City Attack, I think. I can't remember the exact mode, where you gain power-ups through this city and run around powering up your Kirby, and then you battle with other Kirbys on their devices, whether it's a race or a battle or whatever. And it was so ahead of its time. It's the kind of thing that we see in racing games and other like adventure-style racing games now. But it hasn't gotten a sequel or a re-release because it didn't sell particularly well, but it's a really well-designed game. And I think that's a testament to the Kirby team who either at HAL Laboratories or who've gone on beyond that to make these games, that they always want to do something a little different and they're not afraid to mold Kirby into something else, funnily enough, as he is very flexible.
Yeah, yeah.
like exactly that. And like Kirby's Epic Yarn, Canvas Curse, all of these games, like Kirby, they're not afraid to take risks with Kirby that they would with other games. There's a pinball Kirby game. And there are these kinds of spin-offs for other Nintendo titles, but I don't think the dearth of titles like we've gotten with Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want there to be more Kirby pinball games. I want more of them.
Please.
Agree. I mean, Nintendo crushes pinball games whenever they put them out. I remember the Pokemon pinball games are really fantastic too. There's a Metroid pinball game, I think, on DS.
There is.
Yeah, sure is.
There is.
So...
Yeah.
My spouse is a connoisseur of digital pinball games, so I like them and I enjoy them. She loves them and is stupidly good at them. And so it's always, for me, it's very much the thing of just like, oh, I love this for her. And for me, but mostly for her. So yes, I can answer those questions. An interesting, fun thing, the Kirby's Pinball Land, one of the reasons, I don't know if this is the reason behind its design or existence, but... I mean, it's a HAL Laboratory game, and for an early Game Boy title, or an early-ish Game Boy title, the pinball physics they hold up. They're great. And HAL Laboratories also this was built off the engine they did for pinball on the NES. They were one of the...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Satoru Iwata is the reason why pinball works in Nintendo.
I feel like he also was the mastermind, and again, HAL Laboratories. I read his book, and he essentially sounds like the tech... mastermind behind a lot of those really technically challenging NES games. Like I think also he was in charge of golf and kind of made that one work.
He did
as well.
Balloon Fight.
Balloon Fight, yes, exactly. So he's just a powerhouse. Rest in peace.
Yeah, no, he was like the 12 Trials of Hercules as far as just like making that work in the 80s and beyond. So yeah, absolutely.
I thought I was the only human being on the planet who enjoyed Kirby Air Ride because critically that game is not well regarded. But City Trial mode, my brother and I would like grab the wave birds like every day after school and just because you can do a round in 10 to 15 minutes. And, that game does have some shortcomings in that you essentially do like 10 minutes of scavenging over a map for different parts and upgrades for your ship. And then you go and sometimes you do a 10-second challenge challenge at the end of that 10 minutes that is over. It's like, hey, how far can you fly, like monkey balloon fight or balloon flight in the Super Monkey Ball games? It's like a 10-second game like that. Or sometimes it is a minute and a half race. But, structurally, maybe, you do that build up for just such a small moment. But I think it was so novel. There are very few games that I look back on so positively. I think back on games like that and Custom Robo as like just an era of GameCube games that are fantastic. Matt, you made me so happy. Sorry I screamed into the microphone there.
No,
it's all good.
Please.
Air Ride is one that's a gap in my history. No one I knew had it. I didn't have it. It hasn't shown up on my radar, and I should keep a lookout for it.
You should, yeah. I mean, the thing is about the Kirby franchise also is that, like I was saying, how versatile it is. I love that when it doesn't work, they're still good in it. I've never played a Kirby game that I just absolutely hate. Like, I tried to replay Amazing Mirror recently, which is a Game Boy Advance game. And it was Kirby's first attempt at doing a Metroidvania. You'd go into these mirrors that would take you to other places, and then the paths would connect on a broader map. But it didn't have an in-game map system. It didn't have some of the other things that were just kind of ubiquitous in the Metroidvania franchise at the time. But it was still an interesting thing. Or even like Kirby Squeak Squad, which was a DS game, is a treasure hunting game. But it still follows mostly the Kirby rules. But like then after that, those treasure chests have now showed up in most other games as like how you unlock certain things, whether it's like sprays for different colors of Kirby, or in Forgotten Land, which is the newest game, like how you save some of the Waddle Dees and things like that. And I love that they keep what works, but in a Mario game, you expect some semblance of rollover. Even if there's not Starmen, you expect a Fire Flower in every game. If there are different hat abilities, sure, but you expect certain power-ups to still be there. With Kirby, besides the eating mechanic and the copy ability, they kind of just go all over the place with everything else. And I love how we've gotten more and more copy abilities over the years, too. Like, I don't know, there's probably 20 or 30 different copy abilities now.
And some get rolled together. Because I played Kirby's Adventure so long, the idea of when I first played Kirby Superstar, and it's, wait, there isn't Fire Breath and Fire Ball as separate abilities, I just get fire? That's weird. I don't like that. Now I love it, and it's great. And no, but you're right. So long as the ability to eat and copy is somewhere in there, what form that takes can come and go. And part of the joy for me is, playing the newest Kirby and seeing an enemy I don't recognize going, do they give me a power? I'm going to eat it. It's super low impact in terms of trying these things out and figuring it out. You get a copy ability, and then you're encouraged to Super Smash Brothers style, just like, let me try a couple different directions, see what I find. It's little mini discoveries, little mini blossomings of, ooh, a new thing. Let me try that out. Let me apply it to things without ever becoming cumbersome inventory, without ever really having a huge move list. I know some of the older Kirby games have been like, all right, here's how you do all the moves with this. But now I just appreciate just kind of getting to figure it out.
Yeah, I do miss some of that. Like, hey, you can do, maybe 3 or 4 moves with your abilities. But the thing I guess I miss and I would love to see in a future Kirby game is I loved combining powers. So like Kirby 64 and the Crystal Shards, you could, maybe there were 6 or 7 core powers, but then you could combine each of them together. So really you have 30 permutations of different powers, and some of them are really cute. If you combine the electric and the ice power, Kirby turns into a fridge. Now he doesn't swallow an inanimate object to get there, but he essentially becomes a fridge that shoots out like ice, which is just like so fun. And without combining powers, if you think back to like Kirby Dream Land 3, at least, one of the few games I haven't played before 2003 is Kirby Dream Land 2 on the Game Boy.
Animal Friends.
Animal Friends. That's where they're introduced. So you'll have to tell me if this is the case there too. But, you get your core 6 or 7 powers, but then you have all your different animal friends that allow you to use those powers differently. The boomerang with your hamster friend and your fish friend are entirely different and add like new dimensions to a game that is at this stage over 20 years old.
Yeah, no, it was introduced in Kirby's Dream Land 2, and that was also part of the puzzle-solving aspects of getting all the secret items, because the powers would play out differently. When you are in the fish, you are able to use your powers underwater, whereas normally you could only do that if you had an external object, a parasol, a sword, a hammer, and they'd move in different directions. They'd express themselves in different ways. And that was another aspect of, yes, there were those like hard solutions, like you need to use this power to open this up, but you don't need it to beat the game. And if you just really like being on the hamster with the parasol and you like turning into a ball and bouncing on it to beat everything, I ain't going to stop you. Have fun.
Yeah, I mean, the animal friends are great, and a great example in the transition for topic to talking about the characters of Kirby, because they're all really iconic and really great. And like, look, when I was a brooding teenager, Meta Knight was my favorite. He's still one of my favorites because he's dark Kirby, right? Every time you beat him, his mask explodes. He looks just like Kirby, but he's a darker color. Like, I love the Kirby franchise. One of my favorite things about Kirby's Adventure is that you spend the entire game thinking DDD is the enemy, and then it turns out DDD is a reluctant ally, and that really he was protecting you from Nightmare. And that keeps coming back. Now, we joked about right back at you earlier, DDD is more of like a classic villain in that cartoon, in the similar way that Bowser was a classic villain in the Super Mario Bros. Cartoon, which is fine. But I do love that as the series has gone on, most of Kirby's enemies become his friends, which is really lovely. Like, it's a story about friendship, but also it allows the games to evolve. Like, the Waddle Dees were always just enemies, and then Bandana D became a hero, and now, like, in the newest game, you're helping the Waddle Dees rebuild. Like, I love that kind of cyclical nature of Kirby becoming friends with everyone and introducing all of these incredible characters. You mentioned the animal friends. I loved them. I can always remember Rick the hamster, Koo the owl, and then who?
And Kine the fish.
Kine the fish. I can never remember the fish's name.
It's Kine. K-I-N-E. I might be saying it wrong, but that's...
Kine, who knows? We're all stupid Americans. We don't know.
Hey, speak for yourself.
That's true. You're a stupid Canadian. It's fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But like, it's one of those things where I really love how dynamic the characters are in this franchise. And like, even though, you know, the tree boss will show up in literally every game, like in the newest game, he's just a little bit different. In some of the last games, he also, like, all of the enemies in Planet Robobot were the classics, but they were robots or clones, like, or mechs, which is really cool. Like, I love the diversity of these characters. And like in Star Allies, which was the first Kirby Switch game, which is essentially just a multiplayer romp, very much in the similar vein of previous side-scrolling games, you had this gigantic cast that you could play as to team up with Kirby, and they released free updates adding more characters. So eventually one of the characters was Rick, Koo, and Kine as one character that you could switch between them and play as them. Like, and I love that dedication to this series, and not just making it multiplayer with DDD, Bandana D, and Meta Knight, which like was the previous multiplayer game on the Wii U. Or maybe the Wii. The history of Kirby is never forgotten in the next Kirby game. Even if mechanics don't roll over, those characters show up as homages or whatever. Or like on the opposite end, in the later Kirby Game Boy Advance games, and I know in the DS and 3DS games, you can get a power called Smash. The power that's called Smash is like, you have the up cutter attack, you have the ability to eat, you have the ability to use the hammer. Like, you get all of Kirby's abilities from Smash Brothers, but in a 2D side-scroller, which is really cool. I feel like this franchise acknowledges itself more than a lot of other franchises. They try to just move on and do the next big thing or something different, which is fine. But Kirby really acknowledges its own history within gaming and within its own franchise.
Well, a lot of Nintendo franchises have, just due to the longevity, the nature of the design within the company, whatever, wander off, I guess, for lack of a better term. Like Mario games, all of the sports titles, all of the racing titles and everything else are very much a thing of, how are you go-karting with Bowser? Because you're off hours. It's like that Looney Tunes cartoon with the wolf and the sheepdog clock in. And you can kind of have that, and it's a little bit irreverent and whatever else. But Kirby, just by design and everything else, Meta Knight is about as dark and edgy as Kirby can get. And you do anything else, it's not going to be Kirby anymore. And it just becomes a different game, I suppose. But because of the nature of Kirby's powers and everything else, so it sort of like suits the meta. Yeah, you got to be a little irreverent about it. You've got the littlest elder god just being adorable and just chasing after an apple while saving the world and destroying everything, but all he cares about is the apple, man.
Matt, you liking Meta Knight as a youngin' is the least surprising thing that you've ever said in your entire life.
Kind of, yeah.
I know. Pretty predictable.
And I remember, like, even the set pieces at times, like, Kirby is not known for its set pieces. I mentioned this on my episode of Side Quests, but I will always remember, like, in Superstar, jumping on Wheelie and just getting off of Halberd, Meta Knight's ship as it's going down with the countdown. You know, as a youngin', fun. Like, that's not really something that I'd experienced before in games, and it's maybe less novel now, but just super fun and interesting.
You can still have tense moments. You can still have great excitement and danger, but It's a different type.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Superstar again also, because Superstar introduced, although we had these in Adventure as well, but like Kirby became known for not just its main story, but its side games as well. Always mini games. And like this was back before Mario did mini games with every DS release. Like Kirby, I think as early as even the first Kirby game had bonus rounds where you could get like extra lives or whatever. And like I love these little mini games that they've always introduced, whether it's like Duel or Racing or Kirby Fighters, which became its own game later. And like now we have like the natural effect of having spin-offs in Kirby just makes sense because of all of these side games and mini games, and they still have them. I mean, in Forgotten Land, I haven't unlocked them all yet, but like there's an arena, you can eventually unlock fishing. Like they're built into the narrative of the newest game, but they've always exist to the point where like Kirby Fighters 2 and Super Kirby Clash are like separate apps on the Switch. They're kind of gotcha games, which, yeah, fine, whatever.
That's where we are these days, unfortunately.
But, like, it still makes sense, like, DDD's Drum Dash Deluxe, like, all of these things, like, introduced in parts of other Kirby games that then spun off into their own things as well, make as much sense in the franchise as your Kirby Air Ride, Epic Yarn, whatever. Like, the franchise is designed to split off into these smaller things. And I think it's because they recognize that Kirby Superstar and the stuff that came later, these games are kind of short. You can beat them in a few hours. So let's give players other things to do that they might find fun. It's the same reason those Mario DS titles had those mini games. It's like these games are pretty quick, or you're familiar with them. They're games that you've had before. So let's give you something else to play when you're playing this game or when you're done with this game. And I love that that's kind of ingrained in Kirby's oeuvre, if you will.
Yeah, it also creates a nice mix of long-form and short-form gameplay. Before I had an SNES of my own or a way to regularly play Kirby Superstar, whether SNES or on the DS, I spent so much time playing Megaton Punch, the timing game where you just, I really wanted to split the star. I don't think you ever could. It's not going to stop me from trying. And that was a great deal of fun, and it never became a point of utter frustration. It was just a thing you could do, and then go play Great Cave Offensive and try to find some more treasures. And that sort of mix of things, and yeah, in Forgotten Land, you're able to have more tight challenges that go on there, where again, there's no pass or fail, but there's get a high score. And I do want to also touch on again, in terms of engaging with the difficulty of Kirby on your own terms, the fact that from a very long time ago, Matt, something you and I have talked about in previous episodes is how a great thing in modern game design is that a game can be challenging so long as there isn't a massive time punishment and loss.
Right.
A game like Celeste where you die and die and die, but you're always right back instantly. A thing like Kirby, even if it can't load as quick as it could because it was an older game, it would always let you try again. If you didn't solve that puzzle, if you didn't complete that thing in time, you can just do it again. It's not a one and done. If you get to the end of a level in Forgotten Land, this is from the first level, so I don't feel like it's a massive mechanic spoiler. You find that there are little hidden missions that come up. And at the end of the level, it will tell you hidden ones. They may not tell you at the start, but at the end you're like, oh. And then I just play the level again and I know what I'm doing, or I know where I'm going with that. It kind of moves that along, and it expects you to do it and expects you to get it, but it doesn't need to like confuse you over it. It doesn't need to go, you get one chance at this. It's like, just keep trying. You know, you play the quick mini game. Oh, you didn't quite get it? Do it again. We're here to have fun. We're shaped like friends here.
Yeah, totally. And I'm glad you brought up Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Kirby's newest game on the Switch. I think we should talk about that a little bit. So if you don't want to hear any we're not going to give any story spoilers, but if you don't want to hear any mechanic spoilers, I would skip ahead maybe 10, 15 minutes. We're not going to talk too long about it. But like, first of all, I'm a diehard Kirby fan. To get a new Metroid game last year and then a new Kirby game this year, two of my favorite franchises, it's like I'm on cloud nine. I never thought. But what I love about this game, much like Robobot before it, is it just takes the Kirby formula and makes it better. There's almost no downside to this game. It's what I wanted of a 3D Kirby game, and it does it so expertly. It looks gorgeous. It's one of the most beautiful Kirby games I've seen. Nintendo is undefeated, especially if you got an OLED, on how gorgeous these games look. But like Geoff mentioned, they've added stuff, like there are hidden missions, and if you get, for every mission you unlock, it'll reveal one more if you haven't unlocked it. And these stages are anywhere between, I don't know, maybe 2 to 5 minutes long. So if you want to jump right back in afterwards, which I have been, and that's why it's taken me so long to get to the fourth world, because I'm playing every stage 2 or 3 times. But it doesn't feel like a massive time investment to get those things done. And for the most part, I've 100%ed it along the way. There are a couple of stages I haven't gotten everything yet just because I wanted to keep going. But like, I don't really 100% games anymore. I'm not a completionist like I used to be. But Kirby feels like a game that I could play for the next year, slowly 100%ing it after I've already finished it. And I love that. I love that there's an arena where you can unlock stuff. I love that there's a fishing mini game where you can beat records and stuff. Also, something that no Kirby game has done before that I can think of, you can upgrade your copy abilities, which is fascinating to me because not only does it change what the hat looks like, which is adorable.
Always great.
But like,
I love hats.
The mechanics and the dynamics of changing them. Like, for example, Sword, one of the most classic Kirby outfits. You get a little green hat looking like Link. The upgrade for it is you look like one of the early bosses in the game where you get this kind of armor and you have one giant sword instead of the little faster sword. And you can always switch between the upgrades. You don't have to stick with the better one. But like now Kirby looks like he stepped out of Elden Ring wielding a two-hander ready to kick some ass. And like, I love that. I love that kind of creativity. I also love that the Waddle Dees are your friends now. Like, did you both know that there is a dedicated wave button to wave to the Waddle Dees?
There is, yes. It's up on the D-pad, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like they just wave back. And like you didn't need that. Hi. But do I do it? Yeah, every time. Like I think that Kirby's Forgotten Land, and I'm curious to hear both your thoughts, is the pinnacle of what we've been moving towards as Kirby games have come out. And not that the older games are worse for it, but I think this is what the natural evolution of Kirby feels like, much like Mario Odyssey. Like this is what next-gen Kirby I wanted it to be, and it is.
I would say that I haven't really been excited about a Kirby game, and this sounds surprising coming from a huge Kirby fan, probably in the past 7 or 8 years.
Right.
I think about everything since Triple Deluxe, I believe, on the 3DS. I wasn't really into Rainbow Curse on the Wii U. I didn't play Robobot, but it sounds like I probably should. Star Allies, it looked like some of the Wii or Wii U side-scrolling games that had come up before. So I would say that I was cautiously optimistic about Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I wasn't even planning to buy it initially until I think I saw the final trailer and said, you know what, I'm going to do this. And it's really interesting to play this game at the same time as Horizon Forbidden West, because that is a game that is huge and mechanically complicated, and it's a game that, you know, I went a week without playing it because I was traveling, and it almost took me, 20 or 30 minutes just to remember, like, okay, all the weapons I have, and this is the different armor I have, and, where am I in the story? And it's just really nice, to your point, Matt, to just grab Kirby for, not physically grab Kirby, but grab the Kirby game for, 5-10 minutes at a time and just play it. And then if I need to move on to something else, or if I, just want to play 5 or 10 minutes before bed, it's just the absolute perfect game mechanically that you can just jump into without thinking about it. Will I play it like you to 100% completion on every level? Probably not, but I think it's going to be the first Kirby game in, like I said, almost 10 years that I'm going to make my way through to its completion.
Yeah, I'm very much in agreement there. And I think, that pick up and play aspect is, again, to its credit, to its origins as a Game Boy title.
Yeah.
Its origins as a game that's not like, you can spend tens of hours finishing the game if you want to, but that's because it can save your progress now. But it only asks a few minutes of your time at a time. And you can continually keep going if you want to, and I appreciate that. And yeah, most of the Kirby games that I've played have been the 2D ones. So this is the first... Because Kirby and the Crystal Shards is another one that kind of missed me a little bit. Not that I don't want to try it, I do. But this is the first 3D one that I'm really getting into, and I'm really enjoying it. And yeah, it's fantastic that we've gotten a lot of Nintendo releases over the last 5 years that have had this feeling of, this is what we've been working towards this whole time.
Yeah.
And I look forward to the next, great landing like that in the next few years where we get another one. But for now, this is a lot of fun. It's great. I will get to the end of a level and get frustrated that I didn't know that was the mission, and then just go and beat it again. It's the right level of continuing to compel me to do one more run.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I think also what this game has going for it, as someone who's an obsessive like me, who doesn't have a ton of time, is there is a gotcha mechanic, but it doesn't cost money. But there are little mystery figures like you would collect in real life, which I hope they make them in real life someday. I would absolutely buy all of them.
Oh, no.
But like, it's literally those dial machines where you put in a quarter, you turn the dial, and you get a little bubble, and you open
A true
it.
gashapon.
True gachapon. And you can collect stuff from within the game. And these have been silly in the past. Like in this, you can collect the different enemies, the bosses, certain landmarks. But it's fun, and they cost like 10 coins per, and you get so many coins in each stage. And like there are multiple machines that you unlock as you go through. My favorite thing, though, if you haven't done it, if you have the game, and you haven't looked at your collection, you've just looked at them on the broad page, click on a certain item, because when you do that, it loads up a little table with it sitting in the middle and Kirby just sitting at the table looking at this little thing. And it's adorable. It's just him staring at his own little collectible.
Kind of like the trophy system in the Smash, I think that's Brawl or Melee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Melee definitely had the...
And so like, I think that what this Kirby game is doing is the kinds of things I've wanted for years. It's funny, Geoff, you say you haven't played any other 3D Kirby games. There haven't been any. There's never been open world stages like this in a Kirby game before. We've had faux 3D before, and there were like mini games that had like 3D maps, but like even Star Allies as early as 2018 on the Switch was still side-scrolling mostly. There were like 3D moments, I recall, but it was mostly side-scrolling. And so like...
Okay, I hadn't played much Star Allies, and in my brain it was the 3D one, and I guess I thought there were more 3D ones than...
The graphics are 3D, but it's a 2D side-scroller still. So like this is the first true Kirby 3D moving in a space, and I think it works so well. And what's fascinating, if you haven't seen, there's a behind-the-scenes video of how the rendering works, where... The reason Kirby is so accurate in this game is because even if you're slightly off, if the camera shows you connecting, even if mechanically in the space from a top-down view you would have missed, you still hit. And I think that's brilliant. If, as Kirby, you can see your item hit the enemy, you hit them. Even if in 3D space with a free moving camera, you wouldn't have hit them. And I think that's brilliant because like a lot of games really force your perspective to make you be hyper accurate. But Kirby doesn't want to do that. Like anything else, it wants you to feel like you're successful and feel good about what you're doing. And I think that this game does it really well. And I'm curious to see what the future of this franchise looks like. And I think that's the hardest thing about getting new games and franchises that I love that don't get games often. Although that's not true for Kirby games. He's had consistent releases pretty much since the inception. But like, what is the next thing going to look like? Like, I love this. But what I loved about Mario Odyssey, what I love about Metroid Dread, and what I love about this game is what's the next one going to be like? Now that we've hit this milestone, what are we getting next? And I think Kirby Forgotten Land is a really optimistic look at what the future of Kirby could be.
One thing we haven't touched on really quickly is the scale of the boss fights in this game. I think that it's probably, and I haven't played Super Mario Odyssey, so if this is something that's in Odyssey, let me know. But it's one of the few first-party Nintendo games where there is a true sense of scale with the bosses that are probably 50 to 100 times bigger than Kirby. And, it's just the little guy taking on the world mentality in gameplay, just so fun. And the boss design itself, too. I'm not going to spoil anything here, but let's say there is a twist or two on the, franchise villains that we know in the Kirby franchise.
Yeah, 100%.
Agreed. I think one other thing in general about the Kirby franchise that I would be remiss if we didn't touch on it is the music.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The work of Hirokazu Ando and Jun Ishikawa cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
Kirby music is one of those things that, again, we are very musical people here. We didn't talk about it for most of the episode, and then you remember it exists, and it's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, Green Greens is one of the most classic themes in the history of the franchise, to the point where I think it's in... It was either in Planet Robobot or one of the other. It might have been in one. Oh no, I think it's Superstar Saga. When you get to the final stage of one of the game modes, the final level is just a homage to the original Kirby's Dream Land in black and white.
That's in Kirby's Adventure.
Oh, that's in
the
Kirby's
last one,
Adventure,
and it becomes black and white, and
Yes.
you basically do an abridged version of Dreamland.
Yeah, and I think they've done that in other games since. And like this game recognizes how much music, and Kirby's Forgotten Land is no slouch. Like it's got an overworld theme that happens all the time. There is a moment, I don't want to spoil it because it wasn't in the demo, but if you have not played the opening hours of Kirby yet, get on it. But there is an opening moment with incredible music, this kind of like opening cutscene of like Kirby getting to know this world, that it brought me to tears. It was so beautiful. It was so well done. It had a charming pop like sensibility to it. Like the music has always gone above and beyond in these games, and they're some of my favorite songs, especially if you want to like get hyped up or just like feel good. They're very good feel good tracks. Back when I used to be on Overclocked Remix pretty regularly, a lot of the remixes I listened to
OC remix
were Kirby remixes, Kirby and Mega Man remixes. They're some of the best remix songs to remix, and like that music has only gotten better. Like Planet Robobot, which yes, Jacob, you must play. It's one of the best Kirby games I think I've ever played, so I highly recommend it, especially if you're looking for something a little different. But the music was phenomenal and kind of more techno-y because it was a robot and like technology-based game. You're absolutely right, Geoff. The soundtrack to these games is unstoppable. And like some of them aren't as iconic as, say, Mario or Metroid or Zelda. But like I think, to me as a Kirby fan, they're just as iconic and definitely just as good, if not better.
I often run into a situation where I've been doing this for years. I will get Kirby music stuck in my head. I will know every note, and I will forget that it's Kirby music and have that thing of like, God damn it, what is this from? What is this from? And if it's one that's shown up a couple of different times, it's got different instrumentation. So you can't be like, well, it sounds like chiptune, so it's got to be, no, what is it from? And there's no lyrics, so you can't like look that up. You can't go to Google and go, what's the one that goes doo-doo, doo-doo? You can't. And
do 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 do. See, we did it.
Right. Inevitably, it will be Kirby music.
Yeah.
And I picked up DDD music because that's very much one that does that.
Yeah.
And all of the music, even whether it's breezy, whether it's epic, whether it's whatever it is, it never loses a sense of joy.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the other great things about the Kirby franchise is there is such a sense of joy and fun, even in tense moments, even in darkness. And this is a wonderful opportunity to point out one of my favorite little localization things where if you compare Japanese and American box art of most Kirby games, they are largely identical, except the American box art gives Kirby angry eyebrows.
Every time. Every single time.
I was just, while we were talking about Kirby Air Ride, I was like, what would it cost for me? Like, what's the current value on it? Because, you know, I'm a physical collector. And, like, same exact pose on the star. One, he's got a big smile on his face. The other one, angry eyebrows.
Huh.
If you are someone who goes onto TV tropes, as I am, the phenomenon is called American Kirby is hardcore.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's this idea that Americans like
I suppose North American
stuff.
release. I don't want to be so America-centric.
Thank you.
No worries.
But I do think it's all of the English releases. I think I'm not sure about the European releases or stuff outside of the US, but yeah.
North American release, I'd say, is a very easy, definite on that.
And I think that's fascinating, and I don't know why. I mean, I think it's probably a big part, like men can't like soft things, which is dumb, but like
Kirby is gender and no gender.
Yeah.
Kirby is Kirby.
Yeah,
First
correct.
you draw a circle.
Is Kirby canonically non-binary or?
I don't think canonically male, but also what is gender when you are the only one of your kind?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like I don't know that it's well defined, but I know people have latched onto Kirby as being non-binary because Kirby is Kirby, which is fine. Mm-hmm. Sure, why not? Gender's a construct.
I don't think they've
anyway.
confirmed a gender in Japanese releases.
It's not a Yoshi T Munchakoopa situation where it's been confirmed, right?
I don't think so. I'm looking this up right now. This is the most important thing I will learn today.
I know on the box art it says he, and in the Wikipedia article it says he, and so I think, but who knows?
Just going back to the music really quickly, the way I always think about Kirby is it's like childlike and whimsical, but it's also like kind of spacey, like in the cosmic sense. So
yes, it's a little sci-fi.
Exactly. So I always think it's like the perfect intersection of Mario and Metroid as far as music goes. Maybe not as dark as Metroid, but I think there are elements of that come through. I just remember so distinctly, you brought me back when you talked about OC Remix. I can just think about the times where I had my Winamp player set up to, those video game music stations and had the little plugins that could essentially download or rip every track that was on there. And I just remember my favorites, that I put on my MP3 player were always Kirby remixes, to your point. So infinitely remixable, and just like the perfect intersection of the darkness and the light that's in the Nintendo franchises.
Absolutely. I do also want to talk about briefly how Kirby is one of the few franchises that often remakes its own games, but does it in a way that makes them better. Like, as much as I love Kirby's Adventure, the definitive way to play that game is Kirby's A Nightmare in Dreamland on the Game Boy Advance. It's just a better version of that game, in the same way that as much as I love Superstar Saga, the remake Superstar Saga, what is it, Deluxe?
Superstar
Ultra on DS?
Ultra is the better version of that game. It just takes everything and it tightens it up, makes it better.
And then adds more.
And I think that's also, unfortunately, they don't have a flawless track record. The version of Kirby's Epic Yarn on 3DS, I hear, is mostly a garbage version of that game, and that the Wii release is better. But it's not unplayable if you don't have access to it, and it is a way to play that game. But I do like that the Kirby franchise has always given accessibility to these games, whether it's remakes or re-releases or collections, that a lot of other franchises don't do. I'd say the only other franchise that did it as much back then was Mario. We got the Mario Advance series and things like that. And so I love that we always get to revisit these Kirby games and that they're not afraid to remake them. I hope on the Switch we get some remakes of maybe the 3DS stuff or the DS stuff. That's now going to be lost to time once those online stores go down, which is
we have the Dream Collection for the Wii, but that's only Kirby's Dream Land 1, 2, 3, Adventure, Crystal Shards, and I think that's it.
Yeah.
I've been looking for that a physical version of that forever.
Same.
But that game is unreasonably priced.
Yeah.
So
For reasons.
maybe someday I'll find it for reasons. But maybe someday I'll find it at a garage sale, or someone will have a copy that I can just buy from a friend. But yeah, that's probably the Kirby game that I'm looking for a physical version of that I just haven't been able to find. And to your point, right before it becomes more difficult to download games off the Wii U, I made sure to grab some of the DS versions of the Kirby games. I actually bought Mass Attack because I do this to myself and buy multiple versions of multiple games. I bought Mass Attack on the Wii U and then bought a physical game because I hate myself. So just if you're listening to this, just know that some of these games may be more difficult to obtain. So maybe the time to pull out your Wii U and just grab a GBA or DS Kirby game before they make them more difficult to find.
Jacob, you and I need to swap collector stories. God.
Do you have this problem too, where you buy multiple copies of the same game on different platforms or the same platform?
Yeah, sometimes because you need it, sometimes because you forgot that you had the other one, especially when you have a digital copy, then you get the physical one, you're like, I already had a way to play this. That literally happened to me yesterday, but we could talk about that after we're done recording.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think also it doesn't just happen to collectors. I've talked about famously multiple times that I own multiple copies of the Mass Effect franchise, multiple copies of Chrono Trigger. You can bet your ass that by the time this airs, I think it'll be out, but with the Radical Dreamers version of Chrono Cross coming out, I'm buying that on the Switch. But you can bet your ass if they re-release Chrono Trigger on the Switch finally, I'm going to buy it there too, even though I already have it on Steam and the DS. Because, I think that when you really love a game, you want to make sure that you can access it. I also do want to bring up, before we start to wrap up and talk about our favorites, we have not mentioned the personality for almost a decade, if not longer now, of Kirby, which is Mikiko Omoto, who is the voice actress who plays Kirby, and I think the Waddle Dees and some other characters, the voice of Kirby in Right Back At Ya as well, the anime that we haven't really talked about, has been doing Kirby's voice for so long, and Nintendo is no stranger to expressive characters who don't say words. It's how Mario and Luigi talk in the RPGs, and Mario, mostly in the game, says short sentences, if nothing at all.
It's part of their accessibility.
Right. And Link, of course, famously grunts, yells, and doesn't do much else. Like, Kirby is a character who, even though doesn't say words, is one of the more expressive Nintendo characters, especially on his face in the later games. My favorite thing is that Kirby has a bunch of different canon faces, like when he's sucking and his face scrunches up and other things. My favorite expression that Kirby makes in every game, and he's been doing it, I think, since Crystal Shards, is the eyes as dinner plates. He actually has white in his eyes surprise look. It doesn't happen often. Kirby mostly just has these little black eyes, but when he's surprised, his eyes go comically cartoony and become these big white eyes with black pupils. And I love that. I love that they've found a way to make this pink ball as expressive as characters like Link and Mario and Zelda and Donkey Kong and these other characters.
And from the get-go, all the levels in Kirby's Dream Land, all the worlds in Kirby's Adventure, these were not times for grand cinematics, but they all started with little goofy vignettes of Kirby messing around and finding out, I suppose.
I just think a lot of his little sausage arms and legs and the things that they can do. I think of Smash on the 64, how he just kind of raises himself like a pole, and his legs are down, his arms are up, and he's just waving to you while he's getting rid of his power and the little star. Yeah, there's a lot you can do with such a small guy with barely any legs and arms.
Yeah.
Just don't Google Kirby strong legs and arms because that's a little bit disturbing.
You'll regret it.
Don't do it if you have anything else to do that day, because you're going to have to think about it one way or the other for the rest of your day. One way or the other.
Before we wrap up, I do want to talk about some favorites. Before we get to obviously our favorite game in the franchise, which I think for us is going to be a tough choice, I want to know if you have a favorite copy ability, because I do. And it's a newer copy ability. I love the classics like Sword and Fire and Ice and all that. But in I think it was either the Game Boy Advance ones or the DS ones, they introduced a bunch of new stuff like Ninja, which had been around for a little bit, and ESP they have in the later games. But my favorite one is they introduced Whip Kirby. You can get a whip, and he gets a little cowboy hat. He's a little cowboy. But it gets it feels very Indiana Jones. I mean, famously in the newest game, they gave Kirby a gun because sure, why not? It was only a matter of time.
It went over better than Shadow the Hedgehog getting a gun.
That is very true. But I love the whip ability. It feels very Castlevania a little bit. I mean, it's mostly just quick attacks and it has a short range. But I just love it. I think it's so wild, the kinds of ideas they've come up with over years. I mean, he can turn into a jet. He gets high jump with a cape, so he becomes like Superman. I love that there is no road that they're not willing to cross. I mean, hell, we haven't even talked about mouthful mode, which Nintendo still continues to promote unironically, which I love, where Kirby can turn into a car, a light bulb, a vending machine and shoot cans.
I don't think he becomes them so much as they took a look at Mario Odyssey and went, okay, but what if Kirby was the hat and took over objects?
Exactly.
Whoa, yeah. Sorry.
I don't even know how how it physically works, how Kirby drives the car by putting it in his mouth, but I'm not going to question it. It just happens.
I've never questioned how Kirby works, and by God, I'm not starting now.
Where do they go? Where do all the enemies go? I don't know. Is there a void?
To the infinite tea party within Kirby. Just finding friends.
I love the whip ability. I just think it's a fun one. I don't think it has an appearance in Forgotten Land, but yeah. So I'm curious if either of you have a favorite ability that you've loved to use as Kirby.
I think there are some abilities that, come into the older games that haven't come into the new games. So I think of Mirror a lot.
Sure.
I wouldn't necessarily call it my favorite, but I think it's the one that I want in more games. My understanding is it's in Robobot, but it's really just Superstar, Robobot, and that's it. So I think if I want to see an ability, maybe not necessarily my favorite, but the one I want to see more of is Mirror. If I had to pick a favorite, I think I'm going to go with something like Fighter. I just like the ability to grab enemies and then also have a little punch that has a projectile. So, simple, but it's effective.
I'm a big fan of external weapon powers. I love the parasol because it's so absurd, and I enjoy when umbrellas can be weapons and magic things for some reason. And you just get to do the light feather fall with it. The hammer is just super fun.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick a favorite, it might be, I don't remember if it's called Bird or Wing.
Oh, Wing. Yeah.
Wing. Because it is a very versatile power. It's a projectile. It is mobility and traversal. So you can do a certain amount of faster flying, dive bombs. It becomes a much faster kind of platforming experience. And Ninja's fun, and you can stick to the wall, and that's cool. But I think there is something, and Jet's super cool. Yep. The ones that are a bit of a versatile travel one, but I think my favorite of them is Wing, because it still continues the control scheme of how Kirby naturally flies, just faster, and it just adds a little more to it.
Yeah. I love that there was also this evolution of Kirby would just kind of change color when he ate abilities to now he gets hats. I just love that. And I'm always just as curious of what the hat is going to look like as I am what the power is going to do. I mean, that's a big part of Forgotten Land is as you upgrade the abilities, the hats change as well. And some of them are just ridiculous looking. And I love them. I love that Kirby gets a hat for some reason. Again, minor spoilers mechanically for Forgotten Land. But when you upgrade the hammer, it becomes a toy hammer that's bigger. And he gets a little kid's bike helmet for no reason. It's just,
Safety. It's a big hammer.
It's a big hammer. Like, I love
Because
that
there's no way you can make Kirby look dignified.
No,
Or
absolutely
let me
not.
rephrase that. There's no way you can convince me that Kirby looks dignified.
Yeah.
He is an 8-year-old who has to save the world at all times.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%.
One thing I do miss, though, is mechanically, at least in the Super Nintendo games, when you used to be able to guard, because Kirby could guard and deflect things in the Super Nintendo, at least Superstar, that at times he would, depending on the power he had, get like an add-on to that. So if you have, going back to Mirror, you would, guard with your L or R button.
Yeah.
And he would then put like a mirror ball around him. He has a guard in Forgotten Land, I believe, but I actually don't even know what it does because I don't really use it.
Same.
I don't remember.
I don't really use it either. But yeah, no, I like that kind of versatility of the powers do different. I mean, like Geoff was mentioning earlier, also as we went on, like down in the power would do something, up in the power would do something. Like in this game, when you get Fireball, since there's no really up or down because you're moving in every direction, when you jump, as you descend, you'll turn into the Fireball, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that for the most part, those powers, you just do a thing. It happens. I found great disappointment the first time I realized in Kirby Superstar that when you have the hammer power, there's a move you can do where you throw the hammer and it doesn't come back.
Oh, no.
It's like a charge move and you throw the hammer and you've thrown the power.
I remember that.
It does a lot of damage. It's very useful. I think it one-shots most bosses. But if you accidentally do it, it's like, oh, my hammer. No.
Kirby is not Thor, unfortunately. Maybe
Yeah.
someday.
And so just getting to find those and like getting to discover the weird quirks of all of the powers. I mean, speaking of Fireball, I love in older Kirby games, and I understand why you don't do it anymore and everything else, but when you had Fireball, every time you would knock into something, it would like boost Kirby up for a moment. So a way to quickly make your way up a wall was to just spam Fireball.
Yep.
And you just bonk, 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 bonk your way up. And it was a lot of fun. It's a little discovery, and I don't think they ever designed anything around you have to do it because Kirby can fly.
Yeah.
There's slowly. So it's not a solution to everything, but it's there.
Mm-hmm. And it's always limited as well because, Kirby's got lungs. He has an unlimited void in his gut, but for some reason, he has small lungs.
Yeah. And can only hold his breath
All
for a
stomach,
limited amount
no
of time.
lungs.
Exactly. Exactly. Before we wrap up, I do want to talk about our favorites. I think that obviously we all have a big love for this franchise, and often I'm very keen to go back to the classics as my favorites or what I think is the best, which are not always one and the same. Your favorite might not be the best in the franchise, but like I haven't finished Forgotten Land, so in a similar way with our Metroid episode, I'm not going to say that it's my favorite, though I have a good, strong feeling it will become my favorite. But I have to say that after playing everything and replaying a bunch of them, as much as Adventure will always be like the Kirby game for me, like one of those games that I will always remember, I think Planet Robobot is mechanically one of the best Kirby games I've ever played and also has a touching story. And so like, I have to shout that out. I want to give a shout out to Reb Valentine, an incredible games journalist who I've known for quite some time. When I posted that I had not played it, she was like, Matt, you have to play it. Please buy this game, play it. Jacob contributed to my Ko-fi to buy the game, which I'm very thankful for. And I did, and I don't regret it. If you are a Kirby fan who have not played this game before the 3DS shop shuts down, or if you can get a physical copy, please play Planet Robobot. It is some of the coolest stuff that a Kirby game has done since the old school stuff on the Super Nintendo and on the DS.
Agreed.
I am at home with my folks right now, and the thing that I'm probably going to do after this conversation is there's this really great local game shop that I always try and visit when I'm home, a few times a year. And the thing I'm going to probably do is go and raid his 3DS section, namely to try and get myself a copy of Kirby Robobot. But on my favorites, I guess, I've talked at length about Kirby Superstar. It is easily like, I would probably say it's my favorite game of all time if I'm thinking about it like really quickly. But if I had to rank my favorites, it would be Kirby Superstar, Kirby Air Ride, just because like I have such like warm, lovely memories with my brother, like just playing it. And even when we, get together at the holidays, come to my parents' house, there's a GameCube here. What we typically do is play some Kirby Air Ride and play some Super Mario Strikers.
Yeah.
We play Super Mario Strikers, which like, again, another great game. Glad it's coming out on the Switch. That's my second. And then my third is probably Kirby Dream Land 3.
Yeah.
Just because, again, of the co-op memories I forged with my brother. The thing in that game is, Kirby's always about these like bright pastels, but in that game, the colors are very muted, which is like super different for a Kirby game, and I appreciate it. However, the new Kirby game, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, will probably be like my number 4 Kirby game of all time, because it is different. It is in 3D. I think it's like fun to play, easy to pick up and play. So if you're listening to this and you were unconvinced or you are on the fence about Kirby and the Forgotten Land, do yourself a favor, treat yourself and get a copy of that game.
I do want to shout out Kirby's Epic Yarn as a game. It is adorable. It is fantastic. And it's one that I have very good, strong memories with, because it's a game that I played with my spouse. And we played it as a 2-player game the entire time. We knew what it was called, but it was called Adorable Game in this house. It's like we finished done with work, we're home, whatever. We're going to play some Adorable Game before going to bed. To the point where if you hold down on either of your characters, I don't remember if it takes a moment or if it's instant, they go to sleep.
Oh, yes,
and
I remember that.
And there was a little like apartment or a little home setup that you would do. It's been a few years since I played, so I'm just like off the top of my head here. And so we would finish the game by going to that area, and we'd both go to bed. We would go to the bed, and one of us would fall asleep on top of the other, and that's how we turned the game off.
I love that.
Because we're adults.
So cute.
And it was such a fun game, and my spouse and I have a similar level of, we want to do as much as we can. We're not going to bang our heads against 100% if we can't. But it was a fun challenge. Some really great ideas. And I'm glad that they transferred over a lot of that crafted stuff to Yoshi.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that suits a lot better, but Epic Yarn was a very good one for that. But as far as favorites go, Forgotten Land is definitely making its way up there. Superstar Ultra is probably one that really got me back into the Kirby franchise. I kind of, during N64, GameCube, I missed a couple of the GBA games. Superstar Ultra made me remember how much I love this series, and has gotten me back into going back and revisiting all of those games. And so, as great as Planet Robobot's incredible, and I do love so many of the other handheld titles, I think Superstar Ultra kind of it's got to hold that top spot for me.
I do have to ask, Geoff, as the forever little brother, were you Prince Fluff in your playthrough?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for not disappointing.
No. Sarah is an older sibling. I'm a younger sibling. So it's very easy to decide who's player 1 and player 2 when we do co-op games together.
Amazing. I love it.
And there's also even the narration of the story in Epic Yarn.
So cute.
It was just so fun. Yeah. And it was like a little bit of a storybook the entire time. And I loved it.
Yeah, it's great. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm considering buying the 3DS version, even though I know it hasn't aged well. There's some screen crunch and some other stuff, just because I do want to play it again. But fun fact also about that game, it originally started out as Prince Fluff's game. It was just going to be a separate franchise. And then when they were kind of struggling to put the story together, they're like, well, why don't we throw Kirby in there, make it a multiplayer game and add Kirby stuff. Canonically, the first time Kirby turned into a car was in that game.
Yeah.
This has been a blast. Jacob, thank you for joining us to talk about Kirby. I'm so happy to have you on the show proper. Your side quest episodes have been great, and I hope you'll do more in the future. Why don't you take a moment before we wrap up to tell folks where they can find you online and find your incredible podcasts.
Yes, thank you for having me, and let me talk about my things really quickly. You can find me on Twitter at Jacob McCourt, JacobMcCourt. That's probably where you could see my musings if you'd like to do that. I have been making daily TikToks, which has been a very interesting platform that I could talk about for an hour, but we're not going to do that because this is a podcast about Kirby. But again, you can find that at Jacob McCourt, same spelling. I host 2 podcasts, the Left Behind Game Club. It's a bi-weekly video game book club podcast that tries to be positive, informative, and funny, and we're about as many episodes as y'all, so grab your favorite game. It's probably in the feed, listen to it, and you'll probably have a great time. And then I host another show called Cutscenes. It's a seasonal video game, movie, and TV show that is on hiatus right now, as one of our co-hosts had a baby and he is wrist deep in poopy, as they would say in the Rugrats. You can find that again, both those podcasts, on all major podcasting platforms. Thanks again for having me.
Our pleasure. Also, if you're looking for starter episodes, you could, for the Left Behind Game Club, you could listen to their episode on The Last of Us, which I was a guest on. And if you're looking for a Cutscenes episode to jump in on, I mean, I'm the voice of Cutscenes, so every episode. But you can also check out their incredible episode on Detective Pikachu, which I bludgeoned Jacob into letting me be part of because I just wouldn't shut up.
Our Last of Us episode is one of our top 5 most listened to episodes.
Really?
So there you go.
nice.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, I
It
think
might
that,
even be
for
top
you.
3.
I mean, I think that has more to do with The Last of Us than me, but I'll take it anyway. It's fine. They're great shows. It's funny because Jacob and I met loving a different gaming podcast that now is no longer around, but I feel like Left Behind Game Club has picked up that torch in a way, making sure that you know about these games, that they're never left behind, that you understand why folks love these games. And the diversity of the series is really incredible. Like your series on Hitman and your series on Life is Strange, multiple episodes, being episodic in the way those games are as well is really great. I can't recommend it enough. Definitely go check it out. Maybe someday I'll come back on and maybe we'll do a Kirby episode. We should do a Kirby episode. I feel like that's just
I need
inevitable.
to
Just bring me and
we
Geoff on.
planned.
Yeah, I haven't shared all my my love of Rainbow Curse. It's really a good Wii U game.
Makes notes for later.
Yes.
But thank you again, Jacob, for joining us. This was a blast. Folks, if you enjoyed this, tell us, what's your favorite Kirby game? Do you have a favorite power? Why is your favorite power bomb? And why are you so basic? No, I'm kidding. You can like bombs. It's fine.
You're basic.
Why is your favorite game Kirby Tilt and Tumble? And
Nice.
why should it come back somehow? Please join me in the love of all of the Why is Kirby a Ball puzzle games and why we need more of them. Kirby's Pinball was out before copy powers were a thing, and I want copy power, Kirby Pinball, Kirby Block Ball. Give me all Kirby Dream Course. Bring it all back.
Course.
Why is Kirby a ball? Who cares? Have fun. We want those. Please share those opinions with us and ideas because, we care a little bit about it. And to have those conversations, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Gmail, most social media things, Fun and Games Pod across all of those. You can also go to certainpov.com to check out more episodes of this show, side quests, so many other fantastic Certain POV podcasts about media of all types, as well as find a permanent invite link to our Discord server for the network where we discuss games, comics, movies, memes, and whatever else just seems like a good idea at the time.
Yeah, as of when we're recording this, though not when it releases, Morbius just came out, and there has been a lot of hate.
There's been thoughts.
Kind hate, but hate for that movie. So if you want to engage in that and many other things, please go again to certainpov.com. Check that out. Also, if you have a moment, rate and review us on your podcast platform of choice. You can now rate and review on Amazon Podcasts, on Spotify, of course, on Apple Podcasts. All of that helps us to get featured and find more listeners. Give us a follow again on the social media. Again, this is about the community we've built. We're so thankful for all of y'all, and we love talking about games with you. So, go check us out and hit us up in those places.
Because we love doing these series retrospectives since it lets us connect our favorite memories with these games because it's not about what game is objectively the best. It's what it meant to you and what you can share with others. And we want you to share that with us because this is a conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Jeff Moonen.
And I'm Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming. Poyo.
Oh, that better stay in.
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark?
Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't screen beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential Screen Beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
Writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry.
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not.
Can I call them Screen Beans now?
Fine.
Screen Beans!
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
Cause you're all Screen Beans now.
She will be mine.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com. CPOV.
CertainPOV.com.